In the last class, we saw how a class is nothing but a representation of a real world entity where it contains some specific data and some specific functions. So if you can remember, we saw that for the class smartphones, we had some data values and we had some specific functions, right? And whenever we are creating an object of this class, each of these data values get a particular representation, right? So in that case, they were being called the instance variables. So if you can remember from the last lecture, for the objects, we allocate specific values to the data. So they are said to have specific properties or specific attributes. In that case, those attributes or properties are also called the instance variables. So we should always have this modeling in mind, right? And that will bring us to the first term of discussion today, which is encapsulation. Now, we all have taken a capsule sometime or the other in our life, right? So, what is a capsule? It is essentially nothing but a shell in which, if we open up that shell, we will find out there are numerous tiny pieces of, something edible, something which is rich in vitamins or minerals, some nutrients, right? And we often take these capsules along with water whenever we are sick. So I hope you are all familiar with this term. You have, taken a capsule sometime or the other in your life. Have you taken a capsule ever? Just write a yes or a no. Have we, taken a capsule whenever we were sick, or when the doctor gave us a vitamin tablet? Have you taken a capsule ever? Yeah. Okay, fine. So we have the idea of what a capsule is and what it looks like. So in the very same way, we can actually imagine that a class is nothing but a capsule which consists of data and functions. So this is the visual representation that we are supposed to, imagine. So encapsulation is the, formal term. So the formal concept is called encapsulation, where it is nothing but the wrapping up or bundling. You will find both of these terms used, in some book or the other. Somewhere, sometimes it is called wrapping up, sometimes it is called bundling, bundled together. Okay. What is bundled together, or what are bundled together? The wrapping up of data and functions. So we take the data, we take the functions, and we make a capsule. So they are bundled into a single unit, and this single unit we have already learned is a class. So this is the first and the most, striking basic concept that we have to understand, that is encapsulation. So I hope this is nothing, very complex for you. So moving ahead, what are the characteristics of encapsulation? Encapsulation is said to be the most striking feature of a class, right? Why so? Because it actually gives us the very basis that makes the concept of object oriented programming so secure. Why? The data is not accessible to the outside world. Now this we have already gone through in our first lecture, but still we are going through it today again. The data is not accessible to the outside world. The data is accessible only to the functions of the same class. So whatever function we have in the same class, only those functions can access the data of that class. Any other function from any other class cannot access the data directly if they want to, right? So this is what the encapsulation has as characteristics. So again, this you are supposed to, understand and remember. So we have to understand something, a class definition. So whenever we are defining a class or when we are creating an object, all of these are just, small parts of essentially a complete program. So I can have a complete program in object oriented programming language. Let's take for example C++. So in that program, there is one part for a class definition and there is one tiny part for object creation. Now the remaining part can have many other components in that same program. Fine. So in that case, how do we ensure that encapsulation actually works? So And we already know that only the objects of a program have actual existence, right? So in the last class we studied and we saw how when we are creating an object, only then a class is being actually, instantiated, and there is some memory footprint. So we are actually consuming memory only when we are creating an object, not when we are defining a class. So this is one thing that we already know. Also in the previous point, you can see that a class definition and object creation is not the complete program. There are many other components that can exist in the same program. There can be structures, there can be for loops, there can be functions, anything else, anything that is acceptable in the memory, in the programming language, right? So how does the objects data interact with the main program? Now this is something that we have to, conceptualize, because few moments back we saw that the data is not accessible to the outside world. So if I cannot access the data of the object, if I cannot access that data, then how does my, object oriented programming actually work? Because if I do not get any access to the data, then I cannot actually use that object, right? Even if I cannot read or, forget about writing to the object's data, even if I cannot read the object's data, even that will be a big problem for me. So how does that work? That works in this way. So you can see that there is a main program. So just like in C++ also, we have essentially a main program, and execution is said to start from the main program. Okay. So within the main program, we are supposed to create our objects that we will learn very, very soon. Within the main program, we are supposed to create our objects, right? Now, every object consists of this part, the data and the functions, right? So from within the main program, we can interact with the functions of the object, right? From within the main program, we can actually work with the functions of the object. That is the functions that are specified by the class. From within the main program, we have no direct link with the data of the object. So this concept you have to understand very well, right?
So as in programs, we
Yeah.
call the function in the main program like that.
Exactly, in the very same way, Ayush, we will call the functions of the object too. But if we wish, we cannot, directly use the data values of an object. You have already worked with structures, right? So let
Yeah.
us come to that. You have already worked with structures, and you know that when we are creating a variable of structure type, like we saw in the last class, we can simply, create a data member of that structure type. We can simply access that data member anywhere within the main program. We can do that. But directly, and how do we do that? We do that using the dot operator, right? But for a class, that is not possible. If I wish, I cannot simply use the data member of a class. That is an illegal operation. So in any case, whenever I want to access, just keep this in mind, whenever I want to access the data member of an object, I have to do that. I am bound to do that through the functions of that object. I cannot directly access the data of any object from the main program. Whatever I do, I have to do it through the functions of that object, right? So that is why in this representation, we find there is no direct link. This is crossed out. Okay. So the functions can interact with the data, and you can interact with the functions. So the data, is safe. It is safe, and it is prevented from the access of the outside world. So this is a very striking feature, a striking characteristics that follows from the concept of encapsulation, right? So this feature is enabled by whom? It is enabled by the functions, of course. The functions act as the link to help the main program access the data, right? So if this we are understanding, if this we have realized that yes, this is true and this is fine, this is very logical, then that will bring us to our next basic concept, which is abstraction, also called data hiding, right? So in very simple terms, abstraction means the insulation of data, right? It means the insulation of data. So just relating with the real world, whenever we are saying something is insulated, we mean that it is heavily protected, right? Similarly, in this case, the data for any object is can be thought of as a heavily protected thing, right? It is heavily protected from direct access by the program. Now, whenever we are saying by the program, we mean the main function, right? So if we are trying to define abstraction, you can also say it is the insulation of data from direct access by the program. That will also give you a complete definition, right? This phenomena is also called information hiding, right? Or data hiding. So these three terms are used almost interchangeably: abstraction, data hiding, or information hiding. Fine. So as you saw, this is clearly following from encapsulation, because as we are implementing encapsulation, we are automatically enabling abstraction, right? Now it can be formally defined as the act of representing essential features without including the background details. So this is the formal definition of abstraction. Abstraction is nothing but the act of representing the essential features without including the background details or explanations. Right. So let us again think about it for a while. Just think of your water filter. I guess all of us have a water filter at home, right? So when we are using a water filter, we primarily find, two or three buttons on the surface. So we are not concerned with how the water is being purified, what steps are followed, what technique is utilized. Yeah, we know that when we are buying the filter, we just ask the shopkeeper, how is the water being purified, and he tells us something, RO purification, UV purification, and something, and we are very impressed and we buy it and bring it home. But the next day onwards, when we are actually using the water filter, are we even trying to see in what steps the water is being purified and how it is being purified from the tap water to drinking water? No, we are concerned with the result, that is the purified water. So this is nothing but a real life example of how abstraction is surrounding us, right? So here the internal working or the background details, that is something that the user does not need to know. It is hidden, because if the water filter was devised in such a way that I can see everything that is happening, it is most probable and most obvious that I will get very curious and I will poke into the working of the water filter. And what will happen the next day onwards, nobody knows. Maybe I'll blow up everything, right? So the end user does not need to know everything. There are many things, many internal workings, many background details that can be kept hidden from the end user. And we just need to provide the end user with an interface that the end user can comfortably work with without actually hampering the working of the whole system, right? So the end user only knows what each button on the outside of the purifier does. Now this is the interface for us. That is the essential details. So this is what the definition actually said, that only the essential details are represented without including the background details, right? So let's go to the definition of abstraction. It is the act of representing essential features without including the background details. So I hope now the concept of abstraction, as existing in real life, is clear for all of us. So the question now is, where is the concept of abstraction used? Obviously, we know the answer, right? Classes use the concept of abstraction because, as I said, encapsulation directly brings us to abstraction. A class is defined as a list of abstract attributes, also the data members. We also call them the data members. So abstract, here abstract nothing means nothing but hidden, right? So the attributes or the data members or the properties of a class, they are said to be abstract. they are said to be hidden. Obviously, we now know why. And a list of functions or member methods which operate on these attributes or which operate on these data values, right? Now, please make sure you understand that these functions are not abstract. These functions are not abstract. They can be accessed anywhere outside the object of the class. But the attributes or the data members or the properties, they are abstract. They are hidden. So for example, we can take, like we saw in the case of a smartphone, we have some properties or attributes like size, cost, weight, etc. So these things are hidden. As we saw in encapsulation, these things are, bundled together along with the functions. So a class can be defined also as a list of abstract attributes and a list of functions. But this is directly bringing us to abstraction because the attributes are abstracted, right? So we can conclude that a class encapsulates all the essential properties of the objects that are to be created, right? A class encapsulates all the essential properties of the objects. Now whenever we are saying encapsulates all the essential properties, this phrase means nothing but we are hiding or we are bundling together the characteristics or properties and the behavior of the class. The properties are represented by the data and the behavior are represented by the functions. So a class is encapsulating the whole thing. Fine. The second point says the class uses abstraction to insulate the data members of its objects from direct access by the program. Obviously, we have seen just now. The data members or properties are said to be abstract data members because they are hidden from direct access, right? So these are two conclusions that we have. So we now know what encapsulation stands for, what abstraction stands for. Now many a times it so happens that students say that I'm getting confused between abstraction and encapsulation. Now that should not happen, because encapsulation is one concept which brings us to abstraction, which is another concept. And as you have seen in the last 11 or 12 slides, we clearly can differentiate between them. Okay, right. So let us move ahead to something new. It is called inheritance. So inheritance can be formally defined as the process in which objects of one class acquire the properties of objects of another class. Again, the process, it's the process. Inheritance is nothing but a process in which the objects of one class, class A, can acquire the properties of objects of class B. Now again, when we are saying properties, we essentially here mean the data and the functions. And it is said to support hierarchical classification. It is said to support hierarchical classification. Now let us dive a little bit into what inheritance stands for and what actually we try to mean by the term hierarchical classification. So let us have a very easy to understand example. The bird robin is a type of the class flying bird. Okay, so if we simply consider this first statement, the bird robin is a type of the class flying bird. So obviously flying bird is a class and bird robin is a type. What does that tell you? Is bird robin a class or an object? Just type in the chat box. What do you think? The bird robin, is it a class or is it an object? Object, right? Thank you. Okay, so for a second back there, I thought I had lost network. Right, good. So robin is an object. Thank you. And the object robin belongs to the class flying bird. This is very fine. But we can say the class flying bird is a part of the class bird. Now think critically. There is a class, a general class called bird, which can be broken down into many, subcategories, subclasses. Now, flying bird is one of those specific subclasses. There can be other types of birds, you know. So in this case, both flying bird and bird are classes. Make sure you understand that flying bird is not an object of class bird. No, it is nothing but a similar class, similar to bird. So let us try to understand this visually. So we have at the top, see, at the top we have a parent class, or it is often called a base class, which is called bird. Its name is bird. And this class contains certain attributes. Attributes are nothing but the data members, and it contains certain functions such as feathers, lay eggs, etc. Right? So the parent class is bird, and this parent class can be visualized as a collection or as a template for different types of subclasses. One subclass to the left is flying bird. The other subclass to the right side is non-flying bird. Now, in both these cases, you will find that the attributes are kept the same because every bird has the same attributes. Two legs, two eyes, one nose, one beak, and so on. Right. So, essentially, hierarchical classification, the term that we saw previously, means this sort of a structure where we have a parent class, and this flying bird and non-flying bird are subclasses which are, you know, hierarchically, they are inheriting the attributes and behavior of the bird class. So flying bird has the same attributes and the same functions as the bird class. Similarly, non-flying bird has the same attributes and the same functions as the bird class. Now for flying bird class, we can have several objects, and the same thing can happen for non-flying birds. So we know that penguin, kiwi, emu, these things are non-flying birds. So these can be treated as objects for non-flying birds. Similarly, swallow, robin, parrot, everything, they are the examples of flying birds. But both flying and non-flying, these two classes are nothing but subclasses or derived classes, you know, as they have the same properties and same behavior of the bird class, because bird is nothing but a generalized representation. So how do we actually use this? I hope this visualization is pretty well understood, but how do we use this? So let us come to the working principle. So whenever we are talking about this visualization, we have to understand how it actually works, how it is, supposed to make sense. Why would we do this? I mean, what is the need? You are saying that you have a class called bird. Now you can use its properties and behavior in another class called flying bird, non-flying bird. Why? I could simply create as many classes as I want because class takes up no memory. That is completely fine. The point is, each derived class, in this case, the class called flying bird is a derived class. Similarly, the class called non-flying bird is another derived class. So in each case, the derived class shares some common characteristics with the class from which it is derived. So it is nothing but what we have in genetic inheritance. So we all have some, genetic characteristics which we gain from our forefathers, right? In the same way, we can visualize that classes can also gain, properties, some common characteristics from their parent class. So this sort of a hierarchical classification. So this is nothing but a hierarchy, right? One comes to another, that comes to another. That is nothing but a top-down hierarchical approach. So this sort of an hierarchy is also possible when we are working with the concept of classes. So what is the advantage of inheritance? I mean, we as a concept we have understood, but what is its advantage? Does nothing but provides reusability. It provides us reusability. So we have the ability to add additional features to an existing class without modifying it. So let's say Shantanu has written a class called birds, right? Shantanu has written this class called birds. and he is very happy about it. But next day, somebody tells Trina that you need to, have two classes. One is for flying birds, the other is for non-flying birds. Now, Trina can do two things. She can either write these classes from scratch. She can either, write another class definition for flying bird and a new class definition for non-flying birds. Or what she can do is, since Shantanu is her friend, she can simply take permission from Shantanu, right? And she can simply use Shantanu's bird class. And she can just create a class called flying bird, which is deriving all the properties of the class bird. Now make sure you understand that the class bird was created by Shantanu. The class flying bird is being created by Trina. But what she is doing is she is not, writing the whole code again. Because she is intelligent, what she is doing is she is deriving. She knows that since it is a bird, it has to have the same properties and behavior. So she is simply naming it as flying bird, and she is just deriving the base class or the parent class that was created by Shantanu. Similarly, the next day, Ayush has to create the class called non-flying bird. So again, Ayush is intelligent. So what he will do is he will simply inherit, he will simply derive all the properties from the class called bird into his own class called non-flying bird. Again, what he has done in this matter is he has reused the code written by Shantanu. So this is inheritance is concerned only with code reuse, reusability of code, right? So that is what is written here. So we have the ability also to add additional features to an existing class without modifying it. So if Trina wishes, what she can do, she can inherit the base class called bird into her new class, which is called flying bird. That is fine. But maybe it may so happen that Trina wants to add some new functionality to her derived class. Make sure you understand this concept. Trina has derived the class birds into her own class, which she has named as flying birds. But at some point of time, Trina feels that she has to add some new functionality to her class flying birds. So that is a very, very legal operation. She can do that. So there is the ability to add additional features, right? So essentially, you can imagine that you are adding features to the parent class, but only in its derived form. So you are simply working with the class birds plus your own required features. So that is the ability, that is the power that you are given by the property of inheritance. So we can derive a new class from an existing class, and the new class will have all the features of the base class. So whatever characteristics and behavior it has, the new class will have all of them, as well as its own features, if any. So if you require, just like that, just like Trina thought that she needs some new functions in her own class, she can add them. There is no restriction on that, right? So the new class defines only the features that are unique to it. So in the new class, we do not have to make any separate definitions, because whatever we have defined in the parent class, we will have them in the new class as well. But we can only define the one that we are trying to add to that existing class. The only function that we need separately, that we will simply add, right? So this is how inheritance is advantageous for us. So the power of inheritance, as I said, lies in the fact that we can reuse a class, which is almost exactly what we want to define as a class. So Trina wants to define flying bird as a class. So she knows that Shantanu has already defined birds. So she can simply reuse that class. That is the power she is utilizing. We have the freedom to reshape the class to make it more suited for our purpose. So once Trina has defined flying birds, she can reshape that class to make it more suited for her purpose. By reshaping, I mean she can add some functionality to that class, right? And this can be done without affecting any of the other classes. So when Trina has derived flying birds from birds, and Trina is adding some functionality to her own flying birds class, she is not at all touching the class which was created by Shantanu, which is called birds. No, there is no change on the class birds. Trina is simply working on her derived version of the class, right? So this is all about inheritance, the concept of inheritance. And as a last concept, we will come to something called polymorphism, right? So poly, the word poly actually means many, numerous, and morph stands for form. So polymorphism can be very easily, defined as the ability to take more than one form, right? So this is the last concept, last basic concept of object-oriented programming that we need to learn. Now let us take a simple illustration. An operation may exhibit different behavior in different instances, right? Now, by the word different instances, we mean under different circumstances. And this behavior, this change in behavior, it is dependent on the type of the data that is used in this operation. So, depending on what data we are using in the operation, the behavior will vary, right? So, let us try to understand it. Consider the operation of addition, right? So, for addition, we actually essentially use a plus operator, right? So, in the case of addition, it will generate what? It will generate the sum. So when we are giving two numbers, 2 plus 3, I will get an output as 5, because that is how the addition operation works on numbers. But if somebody wants to give strings as input, so in the case of strings, the same operation will generate a concatenated string. You know what concatenation is, right? So it will simply merge or place them side by side. That is called concatenation operation for a string. But again, for that concatenation, the operation is the same. It is addition. The plus operator is used. So you can see that the same operation has two different behaviors only by changing the type of data that is being used. When we are using numbers as data, we have one type of behavior. When we are using strings as data, we have a different type of behavior. So this is the fun of polymorphism. So the same operation, keep in mind, the same operation can have different behaviors. So this phenomena is called operator overloading, and we will learn this. We will learn this while we are, working with our practical classes. We will learn how to mm, work with operator overloading. So it follows that the operator plus is made to exhibit different behavior in different circumstances, different behavior in different instances. So when the instance is that of numbers, the behavior is addition. When the instance is that of strings, the behavior is concatenation. This phenomena is called operator overloading. Fine. Now, there is another example that we can have, and it is called function overloading. See, we can have something called function overloading. So let us take another illustration. We have a class called shape. There is a class shape, as you can see at the top. And for the class shape, we have a function called draw. We can, visualize that it does nothing but draw that very shape, right? So for different objects of this class shape, we can have different behavior of the draw function. For example, let us say we have an object called circle for the class shape. So obviously in the case of the class of the object circle, the function draw will take as parameter circle. So it will draw a circle logically. Similarly, if the object is a box, the function draw will draw a box. The object, if it is a triangle, the function draw will draw a triangle. So the same function is used to handle different types of parameters or arguments in different objects, right? So we have different objects, and each object is actually utilizing the same function, but the function is behaving differently depending on the data that is passed to it. Right? So this again is the phenomena of performing different tasks using a single function name. It is the phenomenon of performing different tasks, drawing a shape, a circle, a box, a triangle, a rectangle, whatever. So the same function, the draw function, is doing all of these things. So the single name is being used, right? The same function name is being used, draw, but different tasks are being done by different objects of the same class. This phenomena is called function overloading. So just like we saw in the previous slide that we had something called operator overloading, here we have function overloading, right? So I hope operator overloading and function overloading are, pretty much clear. So the last slide for today, that will reveal something. Objects have different internal structures, right? While using the same external interface or class. So does that make you think that, we are actually implementing polymorphism even in a class? Just think critically for a while. Each object has different internal structure. Each object behaves differently, but they all use the same external interface, which is a class. So using the same class can be given different forms. And the ability to take up different forms is known as polymorphism, right? So in implementing inheritance, when we are implementing inheritance, we use polymorphism. So the class bird was given two different forms, flying bird, non-flying bird. So inheritance actually helps us helps us initiate polymorphism. Again, the class flying bird is given different forms, pigeon, sparrow, etc., etc., etc. So each of these different forms is nothing but a separate object, a separate implementation, nothing but polymorphism, right? So object oriented programming actually ties up, all of these four concepts: inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, and abstraction, which we had seen earlier, right? We had seen earlier that encapsulation and abstraction go hand in hand. Similarly, it can be said that polymorphism and inheritance, they go hand in hand. And all of these are nothing but salient features of object oriented programming.